Thanks for the intro, Adam. And yeah, as Adam explained, I have a consultancy business that helps renewable energy developers do community engagement on renewable energy projects, and I work with a number of different companies, but I'm working with Eden Renewables, which is a Wiltshire-based company, on these two projects in Wiltshire at the moment, which have had quite a lot of attention. So I'll just rattle through them now. The last time I did this, it was sometimes a little bit slow to change up the slides, so just bear with me, please. Okay, well, that one worked. So first of all, why do we need solar power? Well, I think we're all here because we recognise that there's a climate emergency, but also solar power is actually the cheapest new form of any type of electricity generation, alongside onshore wind. And as we can see from this graph, it's currently around £42 a megawatt. It's projected to be around £42 a megawatt hour by 2025. You can see that's cheaper than offshore wind, and much cheaper than gas with carbon capture, which is, you know, the other sort of technology that is being promoted as a possible low carbon solution. It is now subsidy free. The government took away subsidies from solar and onshore wind in 2016, so there's been a bit of a hiatus in developing new projects, but now the costs have fallen a lot, so we are seeing a lot of new solar farm projects coming on stream in Wiltshire and in other parts of the UK as well. So here in Wiltshire, this pie chart shows that the largest share of Wiltshire's carbon emissions comes from transport at 45%. Now, we all know what is going to happen to transport. We're all going to be moving from our petrol and diesel cars to electric vehicles. So we're going to have to generate a lot more electricity to power those vehicles. The NFU now is increasingly keen on encouraging farmers to look at multifunctional uses for their land, to tackle the climate emergency, to tackle the ecological emergency. And, you know, we've got a crisis in farming too that's, you know, partly predicated by Brexit and partly predicated by climate change. So, you know, a solar farm can tackle all of these three things. We can generate renewable energy, which will obviously directly cut carbon emissions through replacing fossil fuel generated energy. We can implement lots of biodiversity measures to boost habitats for wildlife, and also to sequester carbon in the soil, because once you've built a solar farm, you're taking it out of intensive agriculture, and the land is restored, and the soil gets much better over time, and so on. And you can continue to use it for agriculture, for food production, with sheep grazing. People are very sceptical about that. They say, oh, well, the grass doesn't grow under the solar panels and the sheep won't like it, but there's plenty of sheep grazing on solar farms in Wiltshire. This one's just by my house. I have heard of people putting chickens on solar farms, but I haven't seen it myself. And obviously with the wildflower meadows that we can create around the panels, that provides pollinator services with bees, increasing numbers of bees and butterflies, which helps nearby farmers get better yields from their crops. So the two sites that Eden Renewables currently has in planning in Wiltshire at the moment are both connecting into the Chippenham substation, which is around here. Apologies if you're viewing this on a small screen, because you probably won't be able to see it very well. But we've got the M4 going along here, and this is the Leigh Delamere Solar Farm, which is right next to the M4. And then the A4 between Calne and Chippenham runs along here. And this is the, sorry, it goes through there. This is Forest Gate Solar Farm, which is about halfway between Chippenham and Calne. So both of those solar farms are 49.9 megawatts capacity, which is enough to supply the equivalent of 13,800 homes and save 20,000 tonnes of carbon a year. They have a temporary life for 40 years, which is guaranteed by planning condition. And after that, the land returns to its previous use. So it stays in agriculture, it stays designated in agricultural use and returns to agricultural use at the end of its life, and it doesn't become a brownfield site, which is another common misconception about solar farms, and that's guaranteed as a planning condition. We have 40 megawatts of battery storage on each project. We're using single axis tracker panels, which you probably haven't seen because all the Wiltshire solar farms at the moment is fixed tilt, but tracker panels in the course of the day, and they also generate power from both sides of the solar panel. That's called bifacial modules. So you can generate more energy from the solar panels that way. They are offering £800,000 in community benefits over the lifetime of the solar farm, which again is something that not all developers are doing at the moment. We now calculate the biodiversity net gain from each solar farm, which is something we're going to be required to do going forward, because the Environment Bill has a requirement for all new developments to offer at least a 10% biodiversity net gain. As I said, the land stays in agricultural use, but we don't use the best and most versatile land. It's lower grade land, 3B or below. So starting with Forest Gate, which is the one off the A4 between Chippenham and Calne, that solar farm is going to offer a biodiversity net gain of 27% for habitat units and 13% for hedgerows, because we're going to be planting a lot of new hedgerows, as you'll see from the next slide, to screen the solar farm from the houses in Pewsham and Old Derry Hill that face it from the other side of the A4. We're putting in other facilities for the community, like a new footpath going around the edge of the solar farm, and the existing footpath is going to be turned into a bridleway. And what's very exciting about this project is we are working with Zero Chippenham to enable the community to buy into a share of the solar farm. So part of it will be owned by the community, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute too. So again, this is quite a detailed picture, and I'm sorry if you're looking on a small device, it's probably quite hard to see the detail, but I'll just run through it. This is the site layout for Forest Gate. This is the A4 along here. It's obviously very well screened on this side because we've got Derry Woods along here. In this area, we're planting a 30-metre wide belt of new trees and hedgerows to screen the views. But there's already quite a good hedgerow along most of it, but there is a gap. But this should provide really good screening for the people who live in the houses on this side of the A4. That's something that we did as a result of feedback from local people. So the yellow dotted line is the footpath that will be going around the edge. So again, people will have a much nicer route to walk along the A4. At the moment, it's rather a narrow pavement along a very busy road, but they'll be able to actually walk along by going into the solar farm and following the path along here. This is the existing footpath, which is going to become a bridleway. So that will connect up with cycle routes. There's the railway cycle route up to the north there, and there's another cycle route to the south. So that's going to improve a bit for people who are keen on cycling. The transformers and batteries are dotted around the solar farm here. They're put as far away from people's houses as possible. And then other features are in other new areas of screening within the solar farm. All the hedgerows are kept intact and left to continue to grow up. And then there'll be sheep grazing, bird and bat boxes and so on for helping or contributing to the biodiversity measures on the project. So I mentioned the investment with Zero Chippenham. So this is the latest report on community energy from Community Energy England and Scotland and Wales. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with the idea of community-owned energy. And I think what's really interesting about this particular slide is that it shows that 319 megawatts of community energy have been installed so far to date. And in England, most of that is solar. In Scotland, it tends to be a bit more wind and a bit more hydro. The benefits are absolutely clear to see, you know, in terms of money going back into communities, funds that were diverted for COVID relief and so on. But what's interesting is this little number here, which is that in 2020, only 8.2 megawatts of new community-owned solar were installed during 2020. And I think most of those tended to be rooftop projects, not solar farms. So even if we're able to get Zero Chippenham to raise the funds to buy up 20% of the Forest Gate project, that would be 10 megawatts from one solar project. And I think it's a really good solution for community groups wanting to develop more community-owned energy, because at the moment most solar farms, in order to be viable, have to be quite large, because we now don't have subsidies to support them. So most of the solar farms that you see going into planning are around 50 megawatts. And for most community groups, that's probably a bit too much. But if you can partner up with a commercial developer that's community minded and buy into a share of the project, then that's a good way of ensuring that the benefits can stay local and you can use the funds to deliver the sorts of projects that you want. Right, I'll move on now to the Leigh Delamere project. So this is right next to the M4, next to Leigh Delamere service station, and we are in discussions with Moto Services to have a private wire link to the services, which would help the service station to boost its capacity for super fast electric vehicle charging. This site will have a biodiversity net gain of 90% for habitats and 13% hedgerows. Some of the areas have had to be excluded for archaeological reasons, as you'll see on the next slide, which shows the layout. So here again, we've got the motorway along here, and that's the motorway service station. We'll be planting a row of trees and hedge along there so that views for people travelling along the motorway, they won't be able to see into the solar farm. As with Forest Gate, the battery and transformers are distributed throughout the site. Here we've got a mixture of tracker panels and fixed tilt panels because of the slightly awkward layout. So these areas in the middle, which just have wildflowers on, are archaeological areas where we can't put solar panels because our studies have shown that there may be interesting archaeological remains buried there. So we don't want to drive piles down deeper, although the land has been ploughed for generations without throwing anything up. But we still need to preserve anything that might be underneath there. So otherwise, very similar features to the Forest Gate project. I'll just say a little bit about battery storage, because that's one of the questions we've had one of the issues we've had an awful lot of questions about. Each site will have 20 batteries housed in dark green containers, and I'm sure most of you know that now we can do battery storage at renewable energy projects. It helps because you can store the energy from the sun when it's most abundant and then export it to the grid when the demand is highest. And that helps to balance the network and reduces energy costs and makes the whole thing more efficient. People are worried about the fire risk of batteries, and there have been a couple of alarming incidents. The batteries are all fitted with fire suppression and thermoregulation units, and I think you probably may be aware that up at Minety now, they've now opened the largest battery storage unit in the whole of Europe, which is 100 megawatts. So it's a lot more than these two sites will have. And there's also another big battery storage unit currently being built in Swindon, just near the Mannington roundabout, which is where John Lewis used to be. So battery storage is definitely a thing in Wiltshire, and it makes sense to put it in on a solar farm as well. Community benefits. So again, a lot of developers aren't offering community benefit funds with their solar farms, or they're offering quite small amounts. So the clients that I work with all offer what I think are probably, my research shows, that the highest levels of community benefit funds currently being offered for solar farms. It is less than we were able to offer, back in the pre-2016 days when we had the benefit of subsidies, but it still can make a meaningful difference to a local community. And for these projects, they come out at about 17,500 a year. It's linked to the capacity of the solar farm and for the lifetime of the solar farm, and it is index linked, so it goes up with inflation. On top of the community benefit fund, we also have an educational fund of £3,000 a year for each site, and that's used to deliver site visits for local schools. We get ecologists and electrical engineers along and try and inspire children to have careers in science, technology and maths in the future. And we also have education packs that are tailored to the national curriculum for teaching in class. Eden started to make some educational films last year when we couldn't do any of these site visits because of lockdown. And Eden's American business also offers scholarships to college students wanting to study subjects that are linked to tackling climate change. And then at every solar farm, we also put in interpretation boards and photography points so that people can understand what they're looking at and take photographs of the wildlife and so on if that's what they're interested in. Sorry, I've gone back a bit. I just wanted to bring in another solar farm here, which is not being developed by Eden, but it is being developed by another client of mine that has just gone into planning. And that's it is a company with a very similar ethos to Eden, which is called Aura Power, who are based in Bristol. And they've just submitted a project near Kemble, and that cuts across both Cotswold District Council and Wiltshire Council. So, if you're really keen on supporting solar, you might want to look at this one as well. So this is the sort of dividing line. Most of the site here is in the Cotswold District Council area, but this part of it here is in Wiltshire Council's area. It is close to the quite close to the Minety solar farm, which I think Adam mentioned earlier, where we know there's already a lot of opposition. So we think this is a good site. It's got a lot of good screening, and the Aura has been very responsive to concerns from local residents and redesigning the site layout and so on. But again, it is another good solar energy project in Wiltshire that you might want to support. So what can Wiltshire Climate Alliance do? Well, I know from a lot of the names that I've seen on here this evening that a lot of you have already submitted comments to Wiltshire Council to support these projects, which is really, really fantastic, because there's been quite a lot of opposition as well. And it is always, we know from lots of government surveys that most people support solar, but it's really hard to get the silent majority to speak up in favour of it. So for anyone who's already submitted a comment on any of these projects to Wiltshire Council, thank you very, very much. It is not too late. The Forest Gate consultation closed officially on Monday, but today they still seem to be accepting new comments, and the Leigh Delamere consultation closes on Friday. So I will put in the chat box after this presentation links in case anyone wants to go straight there and comment on them now. And then those are my contact details. If anyone would like to get in touch with me, I'm always happy to hear from people. And particularly if you've got questions and things that you need clarification, then please do let me know.
Okay, thanks, Sophie. That was absolutely brilliant. A lot of information to take in there if you haven't looked at the plant or the stuff already on the planning application. Questions?
Yeah, why was a diesel generator put in at one of the solar sites in Wiltshire some time ago? It was not in the paper. They put a diesel generator in. What was that for?
I don't know which solar site was that.
I can't remember which site it was, but I was quite slightly gobsmacked about it. I thought the paper must have got it wrong actually, but
I wonder if it was a gas peaking plant or something to which they switch at times of low generation, but which should be redundant now with batteries. But I don't know. I'm afraid. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I just wonder where the solar panels are coming from.
Well, that's a good question. And most of them do come from China now, and there are issues with that. But the industry is working quite hard to resolve those issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, like most electronic things that we use in our lives, most of them do come from China. But they're
away with that, don't we?
Well, we're trying not to.
Yeah, we had the most crazy scheme here in Alderbury. Somebody wanted to put a solar farm on the side of Pepperbox Hill. I couldn't quite understand it because it was on the north side of the hill. So
well, that sounds odd, both from a point of view of it being on the north side and also from it being on a hill. Because if it's on a hill, it's difficult to screen it from view, and most people will choose sites where you can actually screen it effectively
and keep it flat as well.
Yeah, you generally need it to be flat or in a bowl.
Yeah, and there's a problem with trees, isn't there? And I used to set up solar experiments for the children in science, and I was absolutely gobsmacked actually. One just by accident, I passed a pencil over the solar cells, and they cut out. So you need these links in, don't you? And if you don't have the links in, the slightest twig or whatever shining on top of the solar cell kills it completely. It was unbelievable. Yeah.
The technology's moved on quite a bit now. Can we just move on to other
questions? Yeah.
We've got two more questions, so we'll move on. Adrian first, and then Keith, and now Luke wants to say something. So Adrian first.
Yeah, just a question for Sophie. So I finally managed to access the data in the cloud, and for my postcode here in Chippenham, the carbon intensity per kilowatt hour over the last year has been 307 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour. So here in Chippenham, we're way off the national average in reality. So my question is, when you connect the solar farms, will that bring the regional intensity down? So do they count you in real time?
I hope so, but I don't know the answer to that because I don't know how it's measured, but it should do, shouldn't it?
So presumably you inform SSEN and they pass on your quarter hourly sort of power generation back up to the system, do they?
Well, I would guess so, but I don't. Yeah, I'd have to look into that.
Okay.
But if they're calculating the carbon intensity of power in the grid, if they can do it focused on Chippenham, then presumably they're getting data from all energy generators. Or it comes in through the substation or something. Yeah,
the point is that we're actually quite high down here in the south, and adding batteries in there really helps for when the sun's not shining.
Yes, good.
Thanks, Adrian. Keith.
Hello, Sophie. Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. I like something clear and simple to the point. I'm a materials engineer, and I know that recycling of photovoltaic panels has been very difficult because they're quite a complicated structure of rare materials. So 2 points to the question. Is each panel expected to last 40 years, or will it be replaced during its lifetime? And is there a viable recycling solution that gets back those valuable, useful materials once the thing ceases to function any longer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, I think most of them they are designed to last for 40 years. You have to replace the inverters before that, but the panels themselves should last for 40 years. And I know people who've had panels for 20 plus years. They degrade in efficiency slightly, but shouldn't be too massive. And 96% of a solar panel is recyclable. Now, whether it actually does get recycled, obviously, is a different question. But there are schemes for recycling them. We build in the cost of recycling and decommissioning the panels at the end of their life into the cost of the project, so that there is money set aside for it at the end of it. And most of the components of a solar panel have quite a good salvage value too. So they should have a market for them. And I think at the end of 40 years, I think we're all going to be an awful lot more mindful of the need to conserve resources, and I'd be very surprised if they don't get recycled then.
Thanks, Keith. Just a point, Sophie, the batteries, same question, they don't last 40 years.
No.
Yes, no, well, so I'm told, yes.
Well, they don't.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, no, I know. And again, there's questions about recycling lithium, aren't there? And we're going to run out of lithium, but luckily we can mine lithium in Cornwall as well. So yeah, I mean, there are no easy solutions, are there? Yeah.
No, I think that will be, that one will hit them before the solar panels. Okay, who we got now? Luke first, and then Gordon, and then Mel.
So Sophie, just want to say excellent presentation. Thank you for that. Really informative. My question revolves from scope 3 emissions, and we talk about money fairly for any project, but has there been the consideration of the impact of carbon on basically the construction and also the transport and travel if things are coming from far away?
Yeah, are you talking about life cycle emissions?
Full life cycles, yeah, emissions.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of studies done on that, and the life cycle emissions for a solar farm are a bit longer. It takes a bit longer to repay the carbon from a solar farm than it does from a wind farm, but it's about 1.5 to 2 years, whereas in a wind farm is usually less than a year. But then that gives you sort of 38 years of carbon-free electricity. Yeah.
Thank you.
My fault, I was on mute. Who was next? Sorry, Gordon, and then Mel.
Sophie, thanks for your introduction there and the information, very good. 2 questions. What's the investment cost in this with zero Chippenham? What's the return? Do you know?
No, we don't know yet, because we won't know until we get to the point of actually building the solar farm, and the economics are changing all the time.
Yeah.
So in the days when we had subsidies, you would expect to get a return of about 5%. And there are various different organisations that offer, investment platforms. For example, there's a company called Abundance, where the minimum investment is £5, so it's very democratic and easy to buy in. Others have sort of higher minimums of £50 to £100, but so it would depend which platform Zero Chippenham wanted to use. But we don't know those numbers
That's
yet.
okay then. Yeah, thanks.
But
the second question, as it's a UK company, I believe, yes?
Yes.
Who controls the output from the solar panels? Because the one up by Minety, by us, is a Chinese consortium. And I'm concerned that it's the largest one in Europe and could have a bad effect on our network if they switch it on and off.
Oh, you mean the battery site at Minety?
No, the whole output from the system.
The battery site I know is in Minety is Chinese funded.
Yeah, but the whole solar farm is China.
What there's an existing solar farm at Minety, or the one that's in planning at the moment?
The one that's being planned.
Well, I thought that was JBM, who are I think an Irish company.
Yeah, but I think it's backed by our Chinese friends.
Is it? Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. But
So what's the one that you're doing? The two you're doing?
So Eden Renewables is a British company backed by British investors.
But who controls the output?
Well, it's probable that after the solar farm is built, it will be sold to a pension fund or another investment trust.
No, I'm not thinking that. But who controls the electrical output? Is that the generating board will have control of it, or will the solar farm owners have control of it?
Well, it will be fed into the grid.
Yes.
So it just goes into the
yes,
grid.
But it's controlled by software. Who controls that software?
I don't know.
Yeah,
anyone else know the answer to that question? Because I don't.
I think we'll park that one, Gordon. It's a good question, but we'll park it for now if you don't mind.
Yeah, not a problem.
I'm
concerned about the Chinese, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. No, it's reasonable, yeah.
Thanks, Gordon. Mel, and then Chris.
Yeah, I was also going to ask about the lifetime of the batteries. And when you talk about the carbon kind of payback of a solar farm, that's just the panels, isn't it? So what's the carbon payback of the batteries?
Well, yes, that's the carbon payback of the panels and the cost of and constructing them and so on. I don't have a number on the carbon payback for batteries actually, which is something that I need to check.
Okay.
Yes, Sophie, if you could and feed it back to us, we can put it into our notes. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, hello. I was going to make a quick comment on Gordon's question, actually, in respect of the control of the output of the solar farm. So the operator will basically never switch off the solar farm, because the economic interest of the operator is for it to be always exporting when the sun is shining. So it would be very odd and counterproductive behaviour by a solar farm owner or operator to be switching that output on and off, because it would be against, it would erode their earnings from the solar farm. It's a little bit more complicated than that when you have batteries involved as well. But in essence, I don't think we should be concerned about nefarious interests switching solar farms off and destabilizing the local grid, because solar farms have to have very strict conditions they have to comply with, which are set down by the grid operator, to ensure that there isn't any damage to electricity supply in the locality. So I think I would encourage you not to be concerned about that particular point. And in respect of carbon payback on batteries, I think it's just worth noting that if a battery sits in a container in a field somewhere and is barely ever used, then of course it has a very poor carbon payback. But if it's used all the time, cycling power in and out of it, then it will have a much faster carbon payback. In other words, it's an almost impossibly difficult question to answer exactly what would be the carbon payback of a battery, because it entirely depends on how it's used. I hope those comments are a little bit useful.
Yeah, good point, Chris. Okay, so yeah, it'd be interesting on the batteries thing, what Chris has just said, taking that into account, Sophie, it might be a slightly more complicated question than before, but if the intent is to actually cycle the batteries regularly, like you would do if you had a battery at home which gets charged and then the charger is used at night. It is the same thing going to apply.
Yeah,
well, I would have thought you would have used the power at the most appropriate time to gain the maximum amount of revenue out of it. So you probably will be storing it up and firing it out when demand is very high.
Yep, exactly, because they'll have they've got 40 megawatt capacity, which will be storage for about 80 megawatt hours. So that's for 2 hours at 40 megawatts. So yes, the idea is that it would be used constantly. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if that's what's the plan.
Yeah.
Adam, yeah.
Can I just suggest, it might be good to draw this to a close now, because I know we said we'd have breakout on this, but we're running quite short time, and I've got a feeling that everyone's, we've got some good questions and there's generally sort of good level of support. All I want to say finally is, as Sophie's just put the link to the Forest Gate consultation, what we really need, if you haven't already, is express your support for this through the Wiltshire planning application site. And Sophie's put the link to the Forest Gate one. The other links on if I dig out the link, I'll put it in the chat. There's a piece on our Wiltshire Climate Alliance website which has got the links to all 3 of these sites. And the sooner you can put those on, the better, because there is quite a lot of sort of local, I have to say, NIMBY type opposition to it, and we need people to balance that out with sensible comments about how important it is to do these things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we should draw it to a close, and I also agree about the breakout sessions. I think I'd like to use the breakout sessions to have a quick chat about WCA, but we'll come on to that in a minute. Sophie, just one final thing on the whole thing. In Forest Gate, is it the same sort of approach going to be taken, allowing a shareholding? Local shareholding.
Yeah, Forest Gate is the one with the local shareholding.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes. We haven't got that. We're not looking at that for Leigh Delamere at the moment, but if a local community group wanted to sort of come forward and discuss it, then I'm sure it's something that we would discuss. But we've been talking to Zero Chippenham for a while, and I've known Nick for a long time, and it seemed that Forest Gate was it's closer to Chippenham, so it seemed to make more sense for them to do.
Sure, but a Wiltshire investment, it's in Wiltshire,
yeah.
So it could be a wider thing than just Chippenham. Okay, yeah. But I think to get a group together to deliver that would be a challenge in the short time we've got, unless it can go after you've got planning permission for it.
Yeah, well,
we'll talk about that separately.
Yeah, it probably could. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.